Kavanaugh, Executive Director of the Literary Freedom Project. We're a nonprofit based here in the Boogie Down Bronx, New York, where we do literary programs, primarily focused on the demographics of the people of the Bronx, which tend to be Black and brown people, people of African descent. We've been doing this now for 20 years. This year, Robert Farrell from the Leonard Leaf Library at Lehman College invited me to partner on this program. The program is called Lift Every Voice and Sing. It's actually annual, it's not annual, but it's a year-long program. The official title is Lift Every Voice, Why African American Poetry Matters. Lift Every Voice is a year-long national public humanities initiative sponsored by the Library of America and the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture that seeks to engage participants in multifaceted explorations of African American poetry, the perspectives it offers on American history, and the ongoing struggle for racial justice and the universality of its imaginative response to the personal experiences of Black Americans over 3 centuries. It accompanies a book. Book is African American Poetry, 250 Years of Struggle and Song, a literary landmark, the biggest, most ambitious anthology of Black poetry ever published, gathering over 250 poets from the colonial period to the present. And it was edited by Kevin Young. This is one of, I think, 7 programs that we are hosting. We are doing 5 programs this week, all focused on the main idea of the history of African American poetry. Tonight, we welcome 2 of the cornerstones, 2 of the founders of the Last Poets, Abiodun Oyewole and Umar bin Hassan. Tonight's conversation will look at their history and their influences on a lot of contemporary poets, poets from going back to the 60s, and what they're doing now. Hank Williams is, I believe Hank, you're writing your thesis on the Last Poets. You
Yes, I am.
Yourself. And Hank will be leading tonight's conversation. We're starting now till about 8:30. You can put anything you like in the chat or present it as a Q&A. We'll be happy to ask any questions you have once their initial conversation not comes to an end, but once they've kind of discussed it and made the points that they're really focused on tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Hank, and I'll be quiet for the rest of the evening, maybe not. I'll have some questions myself, so I'll jump in. And we are expecting Felipe Luciano, who's one of the original members, as well as Woodie King, who I believe produced some of the early albums. So
a couple of my plays.
Right.
Yes, he brought that up.
Yeah, and a couple of my plays. Woodie has always been a great friend of the Last Poets, really. Truly.
So you go ahead, Hank. You do your thing.
Ron, thank you very much. And my name's Hank Williams, and I'll be hosting and I guess moderating tonight's event. I teach in Africana Studies and English at Lehman College in the Bronx, which for those of you beyond New York City is part of the larger City University of New York system. But I'd like to take a quick minute to pause here and ask my elders, Abiodun and Umar, for permission to continue.
Yes, you have my permission. Yes, sir.
Yeah, but just don't use that term elder. Just make it so old.
Yes.
Well, you know how I mean it, but thank you, Babas. I appreciate that. So I also want to thank the sponsors of this event and then introduce our guests who are here. So it's presented by Lehman College, the Leonard Leaf Library at Lehman College, Lift Every Voice, One Book, One Bronx, the Literary Freedom Project, which Ron already mentioned, and the CUNY Center for the Humanities. And I also want to acknowledge a lot of the behind the scenes work of Ron Kavanaugh and Robert Farrell, who you see here, you see here on screen, who are taking care of a lot of the technical pieces of tonight's event. It may not seem like much, but hosting and moderating is a whole lot in and of itself. So it is, even though you may not hear them too much, their part of the process is huge. So I think what I want to do is start by introducing Abiodun and Umar, who are already here, and possibly when they join us, I guess I'll read bios for Felipe Luciano and Woodie King Jr. Although it really almost seems like I don't really have to introduce you brothers, but I think you deserve as much. So Abiodun Oyewole is a poet, writer, activist, teacher, and longtime Harlem resident, as well as one of the original members of the Last Poets. On May 19th, 1968, the anniversary of Malcolm X's birthday, Oyewole, David Nelson, and Guyland Kane read poetry in a Malcolm X tribute and memorial in what is now Marcus Garvey Park. And that was the official public birth, at least, of the Last Poets.
Right.
And after completing his BA in communications at Shaw, Abiodun returned to New York and worked briefly at Columbia University. And that's also where he received his master's in education and become a Charles H. Revson Fellow. And he rejoined the Last Poets during the 1990s resurgence, and he's been performing his poetry and writing new material since then, primarily with Umar bin Hassan and Babatunde Don Eaton, the percussionist of the group, who I should also want to acknowledge. Uh, he's the author, most recently, of Branches of the Tree of Life, which is a collection of his poems and essays, The Beauty of Being, and a new poetry collection titled Naked, all of which have been published with Two Leaf Press, and they're available wherever it is that you get books nowadays. And you can find more about him and keep up with what he's doing at his website, which is his first and last name, abiodunoyewole.net. That's abiodunoyewole.net. And you can also look up the fan pages for the Last Poets and find him on Facebook. Baba, is there anything to correct or add to that? Well, there's a lot to add.
Brother, all I know is that I don't need to be here with that kind of, I mean, you gave the information and you did it well. Thank you very much. And the thing about it is that, I'm never really big on all that stuff. My work, and I feel like I have an assignment, and I think Umar probably feels the same way. We have been given praise. We have been given all of our accolades by the people. The people have really lifted us up. And I tell people all the time, I wrote something, yes, and I said something, yes, but it doesn't work until ears pick it up and really hear what you've said and are motivated by that. So I'm indebted to my people forever because they've always shown me love. Umar and I have been blessed to get love from Black people and white people, people all over the world. We have truly been blessed. And I don't say that lightly because there are a lot of folks who have tried to step into another realm and tried to express themselves in maybe an unconventional way, but they went by the wayside. Umar and I are still doing this, and there's still a demand, and it blows my mind. I mean, now we're caught up with doing it on the machine. We're in the matrix. I mean, it's a very interesting situation. But yes, brother, you gave good information, and I would like to say that of all the poets that you mentioned, David Nelson is still alive. He's between here and Ghana someplace.
Yes.
And what I heard from Felipe is that Kane is in New York. He's returned to New York because he lived in Amsterdam for quite some time, but he's back in New York. I have not seen him, but we've lost some of our brothers. We lost our original conga player, Elijah, who was a gem. He was very special, and we also have lost the brother who I think had the greatest influence in hip hop, and his name was Jalal Mansur Nuruddin. On the first album, his name was Alapia Pudin. He rhymed everything. Matter of fact, Kane hated him. He said, "Keep that nursery rhyming guy away from me." He didn't like the fact that he rhymed everything. But
he didn't say guy either.
No, he didn't say guy. He said, "Keep that nursery rhyming motherfucker away from me." So the fact is that I thought that his rhymes were ingenious because they weren't ever. They were rhymes that made sense. They weren't rhymes just for the sake of the sound of the word. And he did some classic poems. Jones coming down, wake up,
Brother
niggas.
Felipe.
So, is that Felipe? So I see you on the phone.
Yes. So can you did you get the login info I sent to you? Oh, okay. Okay. Do you have the Zoom program on there? Okay. Okay. Are you
Hank, can you just put Felipe on speakerphone?
Mm-hmm. How you doing, Pharrell?
Doing okay, sir.
Good.
Just gonna try to communicate with Hank.
This is Zoom, the modern world of Zoom, that promised to make our lives easier. And as you can see, so we're gonna stay here. Definitely not going anywhere. We're just trying to bring, and I'm speaking to all the attendees. We're just trying to get Felipe Luciano into the room. He's one of the original Last Poets, and we really want him to be a part of this.
You know, Felipe really doesn't. He was not one of the originals, but he gets credit. He gets credit for being an original.
Okay, actually I just realized that's not going to work because I have my because I have headphones on. Let me figure out how we can
I can't hear you, brother.
Okay.
Okay.
I apologize for that. We're trying to get Felipe sorted out.
Hank, one of the points that I had just touched on, I had listed Felipe as one of the founders, and it turns out that he was not one of the original members.
Right. No, what
Correct.
happened is that the original group was exactly who Brother Hank mentioned. It was myself, David Nelson, and Garland Kane. An issue arose with David, and Felipe was waiting in the wings. He didn't even have any poetry, but he loved the Last Poets, and he knew all of our background. And when David actually said that he could not be there for one of the most important gigs we ever had, Kane said, "If you can't come, I'm gonna tell you like the Jew. If you can't come to work on Monday, don't come Tuesday." And it was really, I mean, I remember the story. David likes to dispute the story, but my memory is ridiculous, and I remember it, at the details. David was attending Columbia University, and he was majoring in psychology, and there was a field trip, and it was on the weekend when at the East Wind, which was a home base for the Last Poets. We had a gig with Leroy Jones, Spirit House Movers and Players, and everyone knows that's Amiri Baraka. He had a theater company. They were doing everything. I mean, it was amazing because he had gone back home to Newark and he was starting. That's when the whole idea of Newark became Newark, based on what Amiri was doing. And so he was a very inspirational person. He actually, Amiri was the mentor for the Last Poets, because before we came on with words coming off the stage like brass knuckle punches in your face, Amiri did that. Amiri had already done that, and he even had an album called Black and Beautiful. I mean, he had done a lot of stuff dealing with poetry as a cultural revolutionary tool to change minds. And then the other group that we had on that list for that weekend was Sun Ra's Orchestra. I mean, come on. And Sun Ra was out of this world. Everybody knows that. He was special. You know, I mean, he took us to a whole nother level. And so we got Sun Ra's Orchestra, Leroy Jones, Spirit House Movers and Players, and the Last Poets. Tickets were sold out 2-3 weeks before time. This is going to be a jam-packed situation. And David says he can't be there because he's going to go on the field trip. He can't be there Friday or Saturday, but he'll be back on Sunday. That wasn't going to work. So when he left, Felipe stepped in. He didn't have any poetry, but he knew the background. And I loved working with Felipe primarily because he could sing. And so we could do a lot of stuff together in the background. Kane loved it because Kane was almost like Diana Ross. He's like, he wanted the group to be Garland Kane and the Last Poets. I mean, I always say Kane was a cross between Jesus Christ and James Brown. He didn't want to walk on the water. He wanted to slide across the water.
Wow.
Hey, Abiodun.
Yeah.
Yeah, since you've been introduced now, let me put one of the two at this game. Because see, this motherfucker will talk all night long.
As I can see. So let me introduce you properly, Baba, and then we can move on from there. So Umar bin Hassan is a longtime member of the Last Poets. Bin Hassan was drawn into the Black Power movement in his native Akron, Ohio, and left in the wake of the 1967 Akron Rebellion, which was just one of a wave of urban rebellions throughout the 1960s. Bin Hassan made his way to Harlem on a Greyhound bus and was soon befriended by Abiodun, who gave him a place to stay and eventually brought him into the group. Giving the abridged version of the story. The actual one that you tell in On a Mission and live is much more interesting than that. In addition to his appearances on The Last Poets, self-titled 1970 release and 1972's This Is Madness, he recorded a solo album, Bebop or Be Dead, which is available on Polygram Records, and the more recent Transcending Toxic Times and Understand What Black Is, both available on several platforms. And he continues to record, perform, and speak internationally. And you can keep up with him via the Last Poets Facebook page or their website, which is lastpoets.com. And again, that is just a fraction of what this brother has done and continues to do.
But listen, I have to really give credit because it was Abiodun whom I first met, and we met at this college, in Antioch College at that time, and he was the Last Poets were on the show. And at that time, I was on security, and I was strapped. And
Umar, do you remember exactly when that was?
Yeah, that was in 68.
68. Yep.
Yeah, 68. So now I'm strapped. I'm part of security. So Doom comes in, and I said, listen, man, you got to check in. This is Abiodun because this is Abiodun. I don't have to check in. I'm on the Last Poet. I said, listen, man, you check in or you check out. And he said, no, no, I'm Abiodun, I'm with the last poet. So I showed him the pistol that I had in my belt. He said, okay, I'll check in. But then when he got in to the theater, he was on stage, he said, who is that crazy motherfucker y'all got out there with the pistol? That motherfucker's crazy. So I said, oh, homeboy got some flavor with him. But then when they did what they did, him, Galen Kane, and David Nelson, it just fucked me up. I mean, it really just
Felipe, wasn't Kane.
Felipe, okay, Felipe. It just messed me up. So I just said, I got to get to New York. I got to get to New York because I want to become a last poet. And so when I did arrive, Doom was there. He looked out for me. And there's a place I stayed in that people wouldn't even believe I stayed. I can't even believe that I stayed there for about 2 days. But it had to do with Cicely Tyson. You know, it had to do with Cicely Tyson. And I couldn't believe it. But after that, you know, we just started rolling, me, Doom, and Felipe had left, and so we brought this brother in by the name of Jalal Mansourdin or Lafi Pudin at the time, and that's when things just picked up. We started recording with Alan Douglas, and y'all know the rest of the story from there.
So can we back up a moment, and Abiodun, we have the rough outlines of the beginning of The Last Poets, but can you talk a little bit about how it actually got started before you get to the point of the public performance in Garvey Park that a lot of people know about?
The fact that we got started because David Nelson had an anti-poverty program, which was something that was popular back at that time. And his anti-poverty program was called Double Block Recreational Educational Program. It covered the streets of 118th Street and 119th Street between Lexington and 3rd Avenue. And I worked for him. This was the first job I had before I went away to college. So I was the assistant director of recreation, which was a fake job. If they said the kids want to play basketball, all I do is go to basketball, play basketball with them. But I'm getting paid to do all the stuff I do just for fun. And David was sharing some of his poetry with me. I was trying to write something in French because I had taken French in high school, and David was writing some stuff in Spanish, but we both were dipping and dabbing in poetry. I had used poetry to try to win the hearts of older women because I like older girls. And David was just like a romantic and he just liked writing poetry. So we shared. And then one day when we were sharing, David said he wanted to start a collective of men from different walks of life who would go on stage and do poetry together to give an example to Black people of how important it was that we have unity. And he said, because poets usually ride solo, they don't hang out with other folks. They can be reclusive, they can be by themselves. But if we have a group, that would be a great example for Black folks to understand the need for us to come together. So I thought the idea was good. I wasn't jumping about it, but I thought it was good. What happened with me was in April 4th of 1968, they killed Dr. King. My entire world changed. I became a monster. I had been scheduled to be a very nice colored boy and go to school and get a degree in biology and become a doctor. That was all in my forecast. But when they killed Dr. King, I became a beast. I felt that white folks were never going to be just. They were never going to give us justice. They were never going to play fair. They just shot the man that stood on a platform of nonviolence or peace. I lost it. So I really wanted to get a gun and start running around and shooting white folks. I really did. But I called David and I said, David, that idea, that group, you better do something with that because if not, I'm gonna go off. And so he said, I put our names, my name, your name, and this guy I met at Columbia, put his name on the list to read poetry at Malcolm X's birthdays. And so we'll meet and we'll do this poetry together. That's the first, so that's how we got together. It was based on a bunch of issues, but the real prompting of the Last Poets came about for me with the killing of Dr. King. Because when they killed Dr. King, they killed the civil rights movement. The only thing that we had to work with was the Black Power movement. The Last Poets represented that, and of course, in the name of Malcolm.
Thank you for that. So I want to go back to Umar, but first I want to see if we can bring in Felipe Luciano, who I have here on speakerphone because we're having some technical issues trying to get him on the Zoom call, and I'm going to introduce him and then ask him to talk a little bit. and we'll see how well this works, because I'm not quite sure how audible this is going to be, but we'll try it and then try something else if this doesn't work. And again, this is a very short intro of what I could say about Felipe Luciano. But in addition to being a member of the Last Poets, he's a poet, writer, journalist, and historian, and he appears in the film Right On as a member of the original Last Poets and also the album of the same name, which I'll ask Felipe about that. And when we get Woodie King Jr. on, I will ask him to talk about that also. Luciano then went on to become one of the founding members of the New York chapter of the Young Lords, and a decades-long career in radio, and as an Emmy Award-winning television news journalist, where his reports were a fixture for a generation of New Yorkers. And on the radio, he co-hosted the groundbreaking Latin Roots show on the now defunct WRVR FM, and he now hosts a show by the same name with his son, Felipe Jr., on Saturday afternoons at 2 o'clock on WBAI FM and streaming online worldwide. And you can find more info about him and keep up with what he's doing at his Facebook fan page. And Felipe, there's a whole lot more we could add to that, but I wanted to at least get people started and formally welcome you to the conversation.
Well, thank you very much. That was a pretty extensive overview. I don't think there's much more to say, brother.
Baba, you know, there's a lot more, but you're being very generous and very humble. Can people actually hear Felipe?
A little bit.
Barely.
Okay.
Barely.
Okay. We're probably going to need to get you a speaker to make this work, or let's see, maybe I can just. We're probably going to need to get you a speaker to make this work. So hang on a moment, and okay. But Umar, can you tell us, while we do this, can you tell us about the process of recording that first album on Douglas Records and what that was like for you? I'm going to mute myself for a moment.
Well, it was a wonderful thing because Alan Douglas came up to Harlem to find us.
That's right.
He came up to Harlem to find us, and he found us. We were doing work, and he just said, "Listen, I would like to, record you guys." And we said, "Okay." So the relationship with him was cool because he was fairly nice, intelligent, creative guy, and there was no hard feelings nowhere. We never got into any arguments or anything, but the process went really quite well, And the thing was that just surprised us is that, it went so well. There was no things about this being who or that being that. We just all worked on it to make it happen, that first album. And it did. I mean, it showed in the album when it came out how well it was worked together, put together, and the things, how the poets, respected each other's positions and parts and doing it. So, and it just took off, man. That thing just, it took off, and we were happy about that because we didn't think or didn't know at the time that it was going to take off like that, but it did because here's three young Black men who put some down on paper talking about their people and how their people are looking to be free and being part of this system and what we were contributing to it. So we were happy at that time. We were very happy at that time, man. We were okay.
Except I was locked up in prison when the album came out.
How did that happen, Abiodun?
I left the Last Poets because I really felt like I was the last poet at one point. Because like Umar mentioned earlier, when he came to New York City and he came to the East Wing, Kane thought he was a spy, and right away he said, "Get that spy out of here." And because Umar, he could look shaky, but I knew he wasn't a spy, and I didn't feel anything insecure about Umar. So yes, Umar mentioned that his first night he spent at Cicely Tyson's studio apartment, which was around the corner from Miles Davis. And that happened because my girlfriend at the time was Marlena Franklin. And some people know, and a lot of people don't know, Marlena Franklin happens to be Cicely Tyson's daughter. And she looks just like her mother. absolutely beautiful sister. And we were house sitting for Cicely Tyson because she was in California. And I believe the movie she was actually involved with was The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, which is one of the movies that she's did in her career. Umar, when Marlena saw Umar in the backseat of my car, she said, "What are we going to do with him?" I said, "Take him with us." So we took him there, and we went to Sylvie. We ate. We took him over to Sis. He stayed there. He slept on the floor. And then I had a friend named Gloria Dula, and she's probably listening to this event that we're doing now. And she was in charge of housing at the Alamac Hotel, which was a hotel that was used as a dormitory space for Sikh students. Sikh students were students who could not matriculate, who needed remediation work before they matriculated, and they were usually Black and Puerto Rican. So there was a housing situation for them, so they didn't have to go home. They could stay in this hotel. I got Umar's space in that hotel, in that place, and that's where he stayed. And he befriended a bunch of folks. And how he got to be in the last post was, I went to the Alamac Hotel because we had a gig, and I went as the last poet. Felipe was in Spanish Harlem. Kane had gone back down to the village because that's where he felt comfortable. So it was myself and
can't
Elijah.
believe I have a computer here, a new computer, a new phone, and I can't access anything.
Well, now we can hear you, Felipe. We can hear you real well.
Felipe, I'm going to bring you in now because they can, although you can't hear them, they can now hear you. And we were talking about the first album on Douglas Records, and we're going to have Woodie King Jr. come in soon. But can you tell me about joining? Well, I guess about two things. Number one, how you joined the group, and two, the process of recording right on both the film and the soundtrack that you're on.
Okay, the first historical fact that we need to understand, because I think what happens is over the generations, people begin to interpret different versions of the truth.
Mm-hmm.
The truth is that there were three last poets: David Nelson, Guyland Kane, and Abiodun Oyewole. That was the original group. I came in about a year later. I had just released from jail. I wanted to do something with myself. I was a little bored, but more than that, I was afraid of going back to jail. And I needed an outlet. Victor Hernandez Cruz, one of the great Puerto Rican poets, told me that there was a guy on 125th Street named Guyland Kane who might be able to take me into the group. Now, I didn't go there looking for a job. I went in there looking just to hang, just to be part of something. And when I walked in, he was by himself with that maniacal grin on his face. And he asked me, "What can you do? Who are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm just got out of jail. I'm a Black Puerto Rican, Pentecostal, ex-con. I just got out. And if I don't do something with my life, with myself, I'm going to go freaking crazy." Then said, "Okay, well, what skills do you have? What did you learn in jail? Do you know carpentry, for example? I need someone to build a wooden door on a stage because I have a play called something Epitaph to a Coagulated Trinity or something like that."
That's it. The Epitaph to Coagulated Trinity. You got it. That's it.
I remember that. I remember that poem too. I remember that poem.
When I played, and I said, "Sure, I can." Lying through my teeth. I had failed carpentry in junior high school. I couldn't. If you asked me to build a cross, just a simple cross, I couldn't do it. But he said, "Okay, come here tomorrow." We started working like that. Of course, what I constructed was a travesty. It shook all the time. It trembled. I don't know how I didn't fall on the stage and tear itself up. But I kept on hanging with them, and through osmosis, I began to pick up how to do poetry. I knew I was okay with words, but I wasn't a poet yet. I tried my first attempt at poetry was so hilarious Abiodun remembers it. It was I was doing a lot of alliteration. You know, in the forest, spaces follow. It was ridiculous. Abiodun almost fell on the floor laughing. Kane was pretty serious. He said, "No, you're not hitting it. It's not happening." So I continued to hang with him again. Osmosis with three warriors, three poet smiths, wordsmiths, and I began to understand how to make words work for you, how to build word pictures for yourself and for the audience. There's quite a difference between doing
turn on the TV, man. Don't do it.
for yourself in the confines of a cave, of your house, of whatever. It's quite another performing for an audience. We did that. I slowly built it. And that year is when I wrote, of the quick study, I wrote He Battled My Pretty Nigger. And that 50-year-old poem still exists today. People still remember it.
Yeah, you
So
came.
that's how I joined the Last Poet.
Yeah, but you came in with a clear understanding of the needs for your people. You see, in order to really be a poet,
Hello?
you must be in touch with your people. Felipe, you've always been in touch, and it's just a matter of you converting what you know into poetry. That's really what your crowning jewel is. Like Umar, he was always in touch with the people. He was shining shoes, doing poetry, just to get people to come and let him shine his shoes. So it's about how do you find that connection to communicate with your people?
Still make this thing happen.
So,
Man,
so
Jesus Christ.
we're joined by Woodie King Jr.
Woodie King. King's in the house.
Everybody else is on. This is amazing, man.
So I'd like to introduce him too quickly. He is a Lehman alum, which obviously is very special to us, and founded the New Federal Theater and National Black Touring Circuit in New York City, where he remained as a producing director throughout his career. He's produced shows and I should say films, both on and off Broadway, and directed performances across the country. And his work has earned him numerous nominations and awards over the years, including a 1988 NAACP Image Award and a 1993 Audelco Award for Best Director and Best Play for his production of Robert Johnson Trick the Devil. And he also received an Obie Award for Sustained Achievement. And in addition to directing and producing theater, he's also written extensively about the theater industry and has several books published in his name.
Also, a whole lot of people came out of New Federal Theater. Denzel Washington, myself, and a whole lot of actresses now. There's an actress now on this show, Detroit Med. D Med. She's there. So New Federal Theater just produced so many actors and comedians and poets. Woodie just deserves so much, praise for that. Matter of fact, he wound up producing 2 of my plays out of there. So Woodie, how are you doing, man?
How you doing, bro? When am I gonna get another play, man? Like Suspenders, like Aid to Dependent Children. You know, man, we had Clarence Williams III in Suspenders. We had a cast, man. We had a cast for that, for Al Freeman Jr.
Freeman, yeah.
So Mr. King, so we're getting into it. Can you back up a little bit and give us the background that you're already launching into about Umar, which not too many people probably know because I wasn't aware of it.
What?
I was not aware of his theatrical work.
Wow.
And
okay, well, Umar was a playwright. Is a playwright as well as a poet. And if you look at some of those early album covers of The Last Poets, he's there, and he's there. And I don't know if you know, in the last 2 or 3 years, Abiodun has been doing poetry things for us with, and he's the chief consultant on poetry events with people like Sonia Sanchez, Jessica Care Moore, and just a lot of poets. What's that Pulitzer Prize guy's name out of New Jersey? Abiodun knows him. But I'm always into poetry, and I've been into poetry for years and years and years. And my early work with the Last Poets was with a film called Right On with Felipe. Is Felipe there? Okay, anyway, with Felipe and David Nelson and Garland Kane. I think Garland Kane is somewhere in Europe.
He's back in America now. He's in New York.
Oh yeah?
That's what Felipe told me. Yeah, I haven't seen him, but Felipe said he's back.
Wow.
But every time we were in Europe, we always tried to get Garland Kane to come out and hang out.
He would never show up. Never show up.
He would never show up.
But he was very hurt because he felt that he had missed the band. He had missed the parade.
Yeah.
That was a problem. You see, because Kane had said that we were never going to record, and when Kane left and we recorded and the album blew up, Umar and I had no idea the album was going to blow up like it did, but it blew up and it became a very big deal.
And it still is blowing up.
I know. And Kane felt very slighted. David felt slighted, and Felipe joined them. And so there were fights in the street. There was a whole bunch of conflict behind who the Last Poets were. When the fact is that it's a philosophy. There's a lot of Last Poets in the world, and they all haven't been named yet. But yes, the group that was working at that time was myself, Umar, and Jalal. We did the album that broke the ground, that made everything else happen. But it became a problem because no one expected the Last Poets to really become front and center like they did when that album first came out. And the sad part about it for me, I was locked up and I'm in prison in North Carolina when brothers are coming in there quoting what I'm saying, and I can't say that that's me that they're quoting. I mean, so, and Umar and Jalal went on to do another album that was extremely popular called This Is Madness. So the work continued. I felt very bad that there was a conflict between the original members and Umar bin Hassan. Kane still wanted to blame me even today. He says, I brought those renegades into the group. I wasn't gonna say it as the last poet. When Kane left, I had to find somebody to replace him. Umar replaced him, and Felipe was gone, and I wanted to replace him, so that's where Jalal came in. I knew Jalal, Kane knew Jalal. Jalal would rhyme. You could be walking down the street with Jalal, and he would rhyme the conversation. He was a rhyming nut. He rhymed all the time, but he made sense. And those and that chemistry of myself, Umar, and Jalal put out that first album, and I'm very proud of it because we all were communicating with our people. We were actual reflections of the feelings and the mores of Black folks, and we expressed that in poetry, and that's why it caught on. And it's a beautiful thing. But there's nothing on the planet that happens without conflict. So we had conflict. There's no question.
Yeah.
So can you walk us through the process of producing the original Last Poets album?
Well, the original process is like Umar said earlier.
He's talking to Woodie.
Oh no! Oh yeah, right. The original, right. Yeah.
Oh, right. You mean you? Okay. Well, we did a performance, 4 weeks. We played on 2nd Avenue at a theater called a Paperback Theater in the late 60s. And I got this guy named Herbert Dansker to come down. And then he said, man, this should be a film. Everybody said this should be a record or a film. And a guy named Juggy Murray came down. And I was already doing some things with Motown. And they had a representative come down, and we did something at Brooklyn Academy. And that's how that came about. They saw the Last Poets on 2nd Avenue and 9th Street or 8th Street or somewhere like that. And Herb Dansker said, we're gonna make a film. Let's make a film. I can get the money. And I said, well, cool. And David and Kane and Felipe said, but Felipe, he left right after that to join the Young Lords. yeah, he wouldn't help us sweeten it. He wouldn't do too much to help us sweeten the album. You know, I don't know how that worked out with you guys, but you know, he joined the Young Lords and just went into that. And you couldn't get him, you couldn't find him. And Kane did a few plays after that with the public and with New Federal and just disappeared. And then he disappeared to Europe. And you said he's back now and he's still pissed off. You know, I don't know. I didn't do anything to him. You know?
No, he's pissed off because that first album, which he was not a part of, blew up so big.
Yeah.
And he felt like somebody had stolen his legacy, that because he was one of the original members. And I got that. But he left. And he left on his own. Nobody kicked him out. And Kane felt comfortable down in the village. Kane was never a Black nationalist like I was. I was a seriously committed Black nationalist. And I thought Kane gave me a very good head start because it was his idea that we would even have the East Wind. He said, if we have a place in Harlem, we could endear more Black people to what we're trying to do than if we did not have a place. I agreed. I thought it was special because the East Wind is a precursor to the East, which of course we know was in Brooklyn. But we had a place in Harlem between Madison and Fifth Avenue called the East Wind. And that's the place where Barbara Antier got her National Black Theater started. We did a lot of things there. And Kane was the director of that.
And there was another place right next door called the Black Mine.
Right.
Hannibal Ahmed and his brothers held up. So between the Last Poets place and the Black Mine, there was so much Black stuff, parties and poetry going on that corner of Harlem that you just couldn't believe it. People would just stand around after the shows and be speaking and sharing poems with them and doing writing. It was a very beautiful time at that time in Harlem. And I'm glad that we were a part of it. I'm glad that we helped bring that about.
So
the Last Poets was a part of the Black Arts movement. They were integral to the Black Arts movement. They were integral to it. All around the United States, young poets wanted to be like them.
So I want to actually amplify that point and circle back to it, but I'd also like to bring Felipe back in to get his perspective of what being part of the original Last Poets album was like. And maybe I can take
could I say this? Could I say
sure.
this? You know, like Amiri Baraka was the guru of the poets. And when Amiri Baraka said the Last Poets they are it. And you know, and sometimes he would do a Last Poets piece, 2 or 3 lines from it.
So I would actually like to play something very short by Felipe, which is one of the tracks called Puerto Rican Rhythms. And this is very short. It's about 3 minutes and a little bit of change. So we'll listen to that and then we'll bring Felipe back in. And then I'd actually like to go back to Mr. King and bring Umar back into the conversation too. But let's listen to this for a minute.
Puerto Rican Rhythms. Taking you into El Barrio now. Fuck you, man. Let's go. Driving Latin rhythms coming out of candy store jukeboxes. Trumpets, 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 big brass, mashed with sultry congas, sprouts palm trees in the middle of frozen streets. Rhythms, 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 counter rhythms, polyrhythms, Watusi, 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 and Shadow Bozo lives in a thatched hut in the Yambu land of Mongo's mind. Rhythms, 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 aha, baya, aha, baya, aha, baya. Wet their rhythms, Palmieri rhythms, my Chico rhythms, Bataan rhythms, they follow us everywhere. Drown depression, you see, the beast can't beat us with sadness. All we do is turn out the evil spirits of dance halls and damn to do something about it. We mambo in his jive face, cause we are happy people, a joy people, full of brown coconut, mango fruit, and love juice that falls on us wherever we go. Dululu la 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 la, como está Miguel? Dululu la 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 la, como está Miguel? Dululu la 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 la, como está Miguel? Sweetness lies embedded in pores of our black, brown, beige bodies. You see, we don't need French perfume. Sugarcane smells drive our women crazy. Dig it? Look at them coming out of garment center subway holes, untouched by the putrid odors of subterranean monsters. Look at those big brown buttocks sway, play, invite, delight, under dresses as tight as their rich brown velvet skin. Como está usted? All right. Y si me cortan mi palo de mango, me voy a morir. Look at the rippling muscles of the Puerto Rican pack mules pulling racks of cheap dresses down foggy 8th Avenue. Handkerchiefs round their heads catch the Indian sweat. Don't let it fall on unfertile soil. Rhythms, rhythms, rhythms. We eat rhythms. We sleep rhythms. We make love to rhythms. It ain't no rinky-dink, and it ain't no dinky-dink. It's just booming timbales creating sandy beaches for the homeless and machetes for the angry. The bodegas jump. Woman hanging out windows jump. Naked babies on fire escapes jump. Domino players on 104th Street jump. Strung out track down junkies jump. Little number runners jump. Prostitutes jump. Pimps jump. And the barber's cutting up a brother's face because the street lines, you dig it, the lines in the middle of the street. Yeah, well they ain't straight no more. You dig? Because they're curving, bending, twisting to the rhythms of the asphalt. The rich black asphalt makes the yellow line nod as it droops its head and grinds with the brown tenements, and spirits nod their approval because they know we're partying people. Piano, drums, drums, piano, all we think is rhythm. Goose pimples cha-cha my cheek muscles. Boricua, Boricua, Boricua. You live in snapping fingers and shingling sneakers bought on Park Avenue. You live as long as we're able to croak a tune. And rhythms, 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 weekend rhythms of the master of ceremony. Brothers and sisters, I have great pleasure in introducing to you tonight, Mr. Tito Puente. Vaya! Vaya!
You know, when I first saw the last poet, when I first saw Felipe, he was so animated. His words are even animated. He was the first one that drew me to his attention because he was just, he was all over the place, his words, his body. So I said, yeah, I really want to meet this guy, hang out with this guy. And I've had a chance to hang out with him. Felipe is a special person, special human being, and a very special poet.
Yes, he is. I agree. That's a very hot piece. I love it.
How did he develop into being such a good poet if he came to you with no skills?
Well, you know what? Felipe is brilliant. He could think, and it was something that he wanted to do. I think that anytime you put in your mind that you want to do something, if you got the brain power to figure out how to do it, then you'll accomplish that. Felipe wanted to be in the group, and he wanted to, and I told him, I said, each one of us has to write our own poetry. So his first poem was a sham. It was based in the forest. It didn't work. But he came back, and the thing about it is that he wrote a poem right away that just blew me away because it's called Hey Now, where he had all the gangs coming together to deal with the cops. It was almost like the Spoogles out by the door, but in a poetic form. I mean, it was really very, very clever. And it's a classic piece where the chant is Hey Now, and he gives you some nice. Right,
coming down now.
Right. Hey now. You got it. That's right, Woody. And Felipe is a rhythm master because see, if you go to West Africa right now and you play some salsa, they'll love you because they know that music because that's where it's coming from. And Felipe and the whole Puerto Rican crew, they represent that strand that comes directly from the motherland. There's no question about that.
Okay. So we are, so I'm actually waiting for Felipe to call back in so we can actually interact interact with everybody, and hopefully we can get him like that, because you can hear him, but the way we had it set up, he couldn't hear everybody else. So that's what we're doing right now. But Mr. King,
but let me say this about Umar, Abiodun. They look like poets, you know, and that's hard. That's hard when you get people who look like artists. And they're, you know, I guess it's because of what they have been through. So if Umar says, I got to play, man, it's no big thing. You go home and read it right then, because he looks like what he is. Abiodun says, I want to get these poets around me. And if he says, Sonia Sanchez, you don't have to worry about anybody else. If you tell her, Abiodun, if you tell everybody, okay, Jessica Care Moore, or Conke, see if you can get them, just tell them Abiodun is doing it. And things come together like that. It's not like, these are not hard sales. You know? So like I said, Umar, I don't know if you got any plays, but if you're thinking about it, but if you got something, man, you know where I am.
Yeah, I know, I do. I'm thinking of one right now. It's gonna be called, you know, that Midwestern funk and that Midwestern bop.
Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, the music scene basically in New York basically was brought on by a lot of the musicians from the Midwest, you know. I mean, I can go back to a whole lot of names who came to New York to just bring that music forward and push it forward. So that's why I've been thinking like that, but that Midwestern funk, that Midwestern bop, you know. So I'm thinking about what into that right now. I mean, I think I've even started writing a little piece of that. So we'll see, Woody. We'll see.
Okay. All right.
So Mr. King, can you talk a little bit about Black Spirits, the album where there's yet another iteration of The Last Poets on as well, and what your role in that was and how that came about?
Oh, well, as I said, I was in New York. I'm in New York, but I'm from Detroit. So I have this relationship with Motown, and I tell them about poets, and they say, wow, man, it's called Black Spirits. And we got all these poets, man. Eugene Redmond, Marvin X, The Last Poets, Sonia Sanchez. I mean, we had about, I don't know if I don't remember all of them, but maybe you guys do. But we had about 15 poets, Hakeem Matabuti. We had so many poets, man. And we did it at Brooklyn Academy.
Yeah.
Did another version at the Symphony Space in Newark, and another version at the Apollo Theater. And we mixed them, we sweetened it, you know? And that's how it came about, man. And at that time, just when it came out, Motown was going through all these changes and all that. So it just sat on the shelf, man. Yep. You know, I guess that's why The Last Poets are so independent, you know, because stuff can get curtailed, get lost in the shuffle.
And I just want to note that a lot of I don't have all the details of it right now, and I apologize for that. People can look it up. But I just read that a lot of the Black Form records are going to be reissued, and that was actually one of the ones in the press release that I read. So apparently that's going to be available to people again, because that's absolutely a groundbreaking release in terms of the people who were on it. In addition to who you named, Amiri Baraka is on it, Larry Neal is on it, Askia Toure is on it, and
Mari Evans.
Yes.
It's an unbelievable array of people, man. You know, and it took us months to get everybody together at those 3 locations. If people couldn't get to Brooklyn, we got them for the Apollo. If we couldn't get them at the Apollo, we got them for Newark. You know, it was amazing. But I'm glad they're re-releasing it, you know.
So I'd like to play something else, and this was actually requested by Umar. When we were setting this up, I asked everybody if there was something in particular that they wanted us to play, and Umar requested we play "This Is Madness" from the album of the same name, which came after the original release on Douglas Records. So we're going to hear this, and this is just a bit under 5 minutes.
What happened to Douglas? What happened to that guy?
All my dreams have been turned into psychedelic nightmares with Rosemary's Baby pissing in my face and Tiny Tim sticking his moldy penis into my bleeding mind as it cries for the strength to repel the sanctimonious sounds of the right rock group, the Grateful Dead. Dead are my aspirations as they struggle for a free, sweet, smelling breath of life while being choked by the Christianic gas, passed by the most Reverend Bishop Foot J. Sheen as she shouts it to us, oh, in the name of the Lord now. And my realities have turned into a stone figuration of Miss Liberty as she stands on the corners of the world selling herself to anyone with the head of George Washington on them. And all the while he sits on a throne of ego shit with DDT in one hand and a white tornado in the other, wearing a crown of castrated black dicks and reading the non-violent thoughts of Gandhi. And I watch him relax by playing golf with Boy Wilkins bars with painted rustic glue to his thing, while C-Rock's copies of Martin Luther King are popping from his skull to dream the impossible dream. Knock, knock, who's there? It's Red Brown. If you don't open up, I'll strike a light and burn your house down. And I see Malcolm's spirit, his eyes burning red, black, and green flames, and crying tears of Thunderbird wine that seem to touch my lips and make me become thirsty for a taste of freedom. Freedom by any means necessary. It's necessary to have freedom by any means necessary. And I began to hate with love and love with hate. This is madness. This is madness. This is madness. And I look up and see the moon bleeding lifeless white maggots and screaming for my help as the ego's raping claws rip and tear at its virginal form. All ECs, all Tutmosis, all Samra, Allah, Bismillah, Rahim. Give me your undying strength to rise up and reorder the cosmos so that man can truly understand and appreciate the cosmic beauties and realities of science and love. And he has turned the feminine part of me into a sexual freak. Look at her standing there wearing her micro miniskirt made from the strands of Freud's mother's pubic hairs and an uncovered breast dripping blood and pus and her lips colored with that anesthetic white woman called Avon. But yet she smiles at me through the indignity of overcounting ejaculating sperm into her mind. And Maurice McWallace mentally finger fucking her at night in his red dreams, and her soft, wet, clinging tears of love seem to flood my heart with strength to gather all my manhood from my lower head and to put it back into my upper head, and then to put her back on her pedestal as my love queen and not my sex queen. And I hear my mother's voice whistling in the wind, reminding me of the many times he tried to rape her of her blackness, but she, with the strength of a panther, the swiftness of a cheetah, and the cunning of a lioness, would not be caged up with the other lies that kept me from being totally free. And when she came home at night, I could smell the musty closeness of his body and see his translucent fingerprints on a tired, weary physical structure, depressed from warding off his beastly attacks. But she would smile the smile of 1,000 black orchids at me, not realizing all the while that the anger of 100 symbols was residing in my soul. And doing all this time, my father was somewhere drowning his mutant plastic mind himself in a bottle of cheap wine and letting that spiritual catalyst, John Coltrane, pay celestial homage to that white god who was riding his main vein. This is madness. This is madness. This is madness. And dinosaurs, how can you be supreme and sing songs of black love when your mouth is overrunning with the sperm of trigger. And William Siren is going to commit suicide when he finds out that Nat Turner made love to his great-great-grandmother, and he has taken our most violent and militant leaders and took lollipops up their ass to pacify their black power fires, and he is beginning to assume that all of us were born under the sign Taurus to Bull, because all we do is bullshit. This is madness. This is madness. All this madness is madness. This madness is madness. All this madness is madness. This madness must stop. Stop all this madness. Please stop all this madness. Please stop all this madness. Please stop all this madness. Stop.
Woo! That will be powerful 100 years from now.
Yes,
indeed.
That is a major, major piece. And it is a direct indictment of America. And I mean, oh my God. When you just take the time and listen to what Umar said. Umar, that was a genius piece, man. It has been forever and it will be forever.
Because it's all what's happening right now. This is
right
madness.
now. Right
This
now.
is madness.
Totally, totally. We
So-
lost over 500,000 people to this new virus. More people than we lost in World I, II, and Vietnam. It's this talk about madness.
Bind.
So Umar, can you take us back in time for a moment, Baba? And you have this incredible success of the first album that I don't think anybody, really expected. And, Abiodun and Woodie King Jr. talked a little bit about some of the tensions that came from that in the group, which I think everybody should be clear that part of this, part of it was simply what was happening was the unexpected success, but a good bit of it was what was happening at the time and the type of pressure you were under. But can you kind of walk us through the process of going from there to the second album, which we just heard the piece from?
From the first to the second album?
Yes.
No, but that's just my growth as an artist. I mean, learning from all the mistakes and all the things and how I pronounced and used words on the first album, I was thinking about how can I make this more powerful? How can I make my presence or my words more powerful on the second album? And then walking through Harlem, and there were certain things going on in Harlem and downtown and all over the world. I just looked up one day. Well, somebody asked me, I don't know if it was Dune or Jalal who asked me, what's happening, Omar? What do you think about this? And I said, this is madness. And I just started writing that poem, line by line, sentence by sentence. And it's still a powerful, we still use that poem. We end our sets now with that poem, This is Madness,
That's
so
right.
it's had its birth, it has its growth, and it has its, infinity. So it's a powerful piece, man. It's a very powerful piece. And I'm glad that I wrote that poem. I'm glad I wrote it because it spoke about who the last poets are. It spoke about who we are, what we're doing, and what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to bring about some peace, some understanding between people, ourselves, and other races. So this is madness. This is madness.
I have to totally agree with Umar, and I like to say with something that Woodie King said earlier. He said, you can look at Umar and you can look at Dune, and you see a poet. They look like poets. When you have embraced your assignment, when you have committed yourself to the word, and you realize, and you do that only because the people have endorsed you. I mean, that first album sold 1 million copies, and there was no social media. So we're talking about the very first album sold 1 million copies by word of mouth. And that is amazing. I feel honored even now when people come up to me and they say, man, when I first heard you guys, oh man, it changed my life. I said, well, when you bought the album, you changed my life. I didn't expect to be running around the world running off of the mouth like this, but the folks wanted to hear what we had to say. Umar and I have been the darlings of the Edinburgh Book Fair in Edinburgh, Scotland for the last 3 years. And they love us over there so much. And when we go, if they have a sign on a wall that says "Conversation with the last post at 2 o'clock," if you don't get there early, you're not gonna have a place to stand. it's a crowd because the folks want to hear what the poet has to say. The poets have always actually been able to describe and reflect the pulse of the people because they're not dealing with a political scheme, but coming from a real place. And people know that the last poets have always expressed the reality of those who've been oppressed. And I didn't realize that the oppression is worldwide. It's not just in America. So Umar and I have befriended people all around the globe.
All over the world.
Huh?
All over the world.
All over the world. And it is amazing how they open up their doors, their houses. We've gone places in London where the woman will leave her house to us, make brownies, take her family into their little summer home, and we have to run the entire house. But we're also gonna, Umar's a clean freak. So if we're gonna stay someplace, you better believe when we leave, it's gonna be cleaned up. Because he believes in mopping floors and putting things back like they're supposed to. So we've been respected, and matter of fact, Umar and I have been the longest tenure of the last poets. We've been together over 30 years now, and I can't tell you the joy and the blessing that it's been because we've been every part of this world. It's amazing how the love has continued to grow. It's absolutely amazing.
So I think we now have Felipe Luciano joining us on the phone. Brother Felipe, is that you?
It is.
Welcome, brother.
It took me a while to configure out this technology. I can't stand it. Well, I think the iPhone is definitely meant to destroy mankind.
Me and you both cannot figure out this technology. But these young kids, 3, 4, and 5, they can pick it up just like that.
Well, I know. Fortunately, we now have you. So we talked a little bit with, which you probably couldn't hear, with Woodie King Jr. and about Right On. So can you tell us about your part in that process?
Well, it was very simple. Woodie knew a guy named Herb Danska, who has now passed. Herb Danska was a filmmaker. Woodie was a producer. It was a perfect marriage. They said that they watched Woodie was our manager for a long while, and a great manager at that. And they felt that this was an opportunity to do the first filmed poetry concert. It had never been done before. So the first thing they did was film us at a place called the Cubiculo Theater, which was on 2nd Avenue in the Village, and somewhere between 3rd and 4th Street, something like that. And it was a small theater. We had never been outside of our East Wind loft. We had never been outside. It was me, Kane, and Abiodun. Now, was David Nelson there? Yes, he was there. And so we decided to put this together. It was no, I don't think Abiodun was there.
I was on the joint. I was down south.
You were down south.
I was gone.
I love the way you say that. So it was me, David Nelson, and Guyland Kane, and it was a wonderful intimacy. People would come in and they would chant with us, and they almost memorized the poetry. And we actually honed our craft on a small stage. They then took that, and I think we went to the Manhattan Theater Club. I'm not sure, but they took an actual live performance and used that for the film. And then they took us to the Village and had us do the film. Now, it all is a blur because there was so much going on at that time. I was in the Young Lords at the time. I was busy working on activism and, taking over the People's Church and taking over Lincoln Hospital and all of that good stuff. So what happened is somehow they got a soundtrack. They got our images on the roofs, which is somewhere around 4th Street. And that's how it happened. I really didn't think it was going to make that much of a difference. I really didn't. Amiri Baraka did, and so did many people. we ended up going to the Museum of Modern Art because people love the film so much. Amiri Baraka just loved it and thought it was an important milestone to get a film on poetry. At that point, Elijah, who was our drummer, had already passed, and we had another gentleman, Carlos, I think his name was, who did the actual drumming. It was a great time to be alive.
You know, speaking of Elijah, I was talking. I emailed his son and his daughter something about their father. See, the people can talk about the poets, they can talk about Abiodun, they can talk about Felipe Luciano, but the one who made sure that the poets had the right poems in that group was Elijah. He carried his drum. He carried his drum around in a green army duffel bag. And if you told him, he said, Elijah, I got a new poem. He said, okay, go ahead. He sit down. He take unloose the top of the duffel bag in case he wanted to bring out his drum player. But see, if you got to going through that poem and Elijah didn't feel you, he buckled up that bag and walk away from you like, no, you can't play that here. We don't want that here. You got to do something else. But he is the one who made sure that we had the best poetry and the best thoughts of mine. Elijah did, our conga player. He a very valuable part of the last poets.
Very, very much so. And what Umar is talking about, unfortunately, I experienced it in a very negative way. I thought I had written something that was phenomenal. I had even typed it up, and I brought it to the East Wind to put into the program, and Elijah didn't even look at that duffel bag. And I felt so bad.
See, the thing about Elijah was this. Elijah would not, he would put the thing bag, it was a green, yes, army duffel bag.
Yes.
He would not unbuckle it until he felt the poem. Once you saw him unbuckling the duffel bag, you knew that the poem was on. But if he didn't unbuckle it, you knew that you were in trouble. It wasn't even going. It would not. It'd be an abortion. He would not have it. It was not coming out.
Right.
It was as simple as that. Once I felt validated. I felt born again when he would open his clip and start experimenting with rhythms. He already kind of knew the rhythm that he felt with the poem. If it was an Afro-Cuban rhythm, he would do that. If it was an African continental rhythm, he would do that. If it was a jazz rhythm, he would do that. Whatever it was, he kind of already felt the rhythm. And since he knew and was steeped in what we call fundamento, he was steeped in the Afro-Cuban tradition, not to mention the African drumming tradition, he kind of knew what he wanted to do. And you could feel it. Once you start, he would say, okay, now read it again. And he would start, and you knew that this was the right thing to do. And he said, okay, finish. I know what I got to do. We said, well, don't you want to go over it again? We got to perform it. I know what I got to do. And that was it.
And if you check out Elijah's, his whole repertoire on all the albums, he never plays the same rhythm behind any poem.
At all.
No.
Each poem had its own identity when it came to that rhythm. That's how true he was. And that's and you know what, the thing I remember, I don't know if Felipe remembered, but after sometimes we do sets, we have our performance at the East Wind. We from about maybe 1 o'clock until 4 in the morning, we have like a drum orgy where a whole bunch of drummers would just play. And Elijah would be conducting. You got 14, 15 drummers. And the rhythm, oh my God. I mean, if you couldn't go home on those rhythms, you'd never get home.
That's right. That's right. And you know what's amazing is he was already, there are a number of people in Harlem who have been around Pan-Africanism for a long time. And when I say Pan-Africanism, I'm not just talking about a political ideology. I'm talking about the ability to see Africa in every African descent, every African descended person. So he knew Puerto Ricans. You didn't have to tell him to kind of be friends with what he knew them, and he knew the rhythms. He knew the Cubans. He knew the Dominicans. He knew African rhythms. He knew Jamaican rhythms. He was an incredible conga player. And today there's Babatunde, who is another investigator and researcher of rhythms. He has come to concerts that I've been doing with a bunch of Latinos since then. He just gets up there and plays, and they are amazed that he can play Latin rhythms. But it's the same thing. It's Africa. And
right.
that's what counts about the drummers with the last poets.
That's right.
So I'd like to
Okay,
take
did you
I'd like
all
to take
ever-
one of the many questions we have since we're running short on time. And one question is, how do you see your work in the present political context and the relationship to it of what's happening right now? There are Felipe, Abiodun, Umar, whoever wants to, whoever wants to tackle that.
I'll make this clear. We are needed. I think the last poets are needed more than ever. I'm surprised that we haven't been working. Maybe it's the COVID thing, but I don't think it's that. There are no, the poet is the Meister singer. The poet is the soul, the subconscious of a people. And our poems speak to the zeitgeist. We speak to the unconscious of a people. Things that they think but don't say, we say. And so we need to be out there even more, especially in this period. During Trump, we needed to be out there. And even during Biden, we need to continue to put people's feet to the fire and say, this is where we're going. Remember that, and I'll stop here, remember that I particularly think, I specifically think, that we are headed toward a civil war because of white skin privilege and because of structural racism, institutional racism. I hope not. I hope Biden can offset it for some time, but I think ultimately there is the feeling that we are inferior, that we should not have power, and it's too late. We're already here. There are so many Latinos, so many Black folk, they don't know what to do. They're terrified. They are terrified. And so I think that what they're going to try to do is come up with a Hitler plan and try to move us to another level or kill us. So in that context, we need to put out more poetry and prepare our people for war. And I don't mean that, I mean that metaphorically, and I mean that literally. I think we are in severe trouble. And you're going to see many more unless there is a change of heart in America. And as Rap Brown used to say, violence is as American as apple pie. Unless there's a change of heart, unless there's a spiritual change in the American people, we're going to see more and more murders. And I think there's going to come a point at which Black people are not going to take it anymore. And I'm telling you, when the hurricane of hate comes, Black people are going to take America down.
Well, what happened to Abiodun probably knows this. What happened to that hookup with Miles Davis, that he was looking for you all to do something?
Well, Miles did on his album, he did a piece called Big Apple, which was in relationship to the piece I had written, New York, the Big Apple. Miles was a big fan. He loved the Last Poets. And I love Miles. Matter of fact, I remember actually running into Miles on Riverside Drive, asking him about what was going to happen with him and Cicely Tyson, because I knew that they were an item, but he hadn't really consecrated anything. So he told me, he said, I'm gonna marry her. She too beautiful to leave alone. Well, they got married, but they had a very turbulent marriage. But Cicely even says in her book that he was the only man that she really ever loved. I mean, and that's true. Miles was a loving spirit. He was Gemini, Cicely was Sagittarian. So you deal with that astrological stuff. The fire and the air always seem to complement each other. So Miles was a special guy. But the idea of us doing something together just never materialized. Just like we had something that we were supposed to have done with Jimi Hendrix that never materialized as well, because Alan Douglas was in touch with him. But there were some things that we did not manage to get done. But there was an idea on the floor. It just never materialized.
Whoa, man!
If I could interject something, and I want to say this because my son tells me that I speak too much violence, that I seem to be obsessed with violence, that I always give people the impression that I'm on the streets all the time and I'm fighting all the time. It's not true. I'm 73. I've calmed down a lot. I've had to because of some health conditions. But I want people to know I don't want these things to happen. But I see, if you can read politics like Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar, you could see the writing on the wall. You see where America is going. I pray to God that 70%, how many people, that 50 or 48%, I don't know what it is, of American people who voted for Trump do not change. 35 million. If they don't change their ways, we are going to have to deal with them. We're going to take over this country. There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. We're going to see a Latino president. There's no doubt about it. You're going to see black governors all over the place, black secretaries of state. We are ready to take our place on the world stage. I just pray to God that we're able to keep the futility of violence off of us. We're not violent people, but I think we've been hurt so badly, and I can imagine what's going to happen. I hope that they don't do a Rosewood or something here, because that would take us to the next level.
But my thought is, let's not worry about the white violence that is committed on us. Let's start worrying about the black violence that is killing all of us and taking over us. That's what we really got to start worrying about. Forget white people, because we do more killing of each other than any white people, any white group.
Yes.
So that's what we have to start dealing with. How we are scared to talk to each other, how some of us don't like each other. We have to start dealing with our own inner reserves of hatred and self-defeat.
Inner contradictions. Yes.
That's right. Absolutely. Umar, that's on point. The fact is that we have got to deal with the reparations of ourselves, and it ain't got nothing to do with a check. Reparation means to repair the damaged goods of ourselves. Because that's what's been happening here. And if we stop doing the hurt and creating the madness amongst ourselves, it would automatically deflate whatever little ego white folks have, because we give them too much attention to begin with. We are servants. They brought us here to serve, and we have served them. You turn on a damn sporting event, if you don't see no black folks, it ain't no reason to watch. If you want to be entertained, you have to come to us. You want some good food, you got to come to us. You want your baby taken care of, you got to come to us. You want somebody to drive your car, you got to. We are still the servants, and they know that, and we do it so well. We're loving people. We've never been militant. We've never been evil. Felipe, when you talk about violence, that's America's creed. The very national anthem that we sing is about war and destruction. It's about bombs bursting in the air. Nobody thinks about the fact that there are bodies under those bombs, and they love that. When they dropped the bomb in Hiroshima, they asked the guy that dropped the bomb, what do you think about it? He said that was a beautiful mushroom. That's these people, they applaud violence. That's what they live for. But the fact of the matter is, you're right, Felipe. Not only is this a time of change where the complexions of the leadership is going to change, but I'm going to tell you something else. The women are going to be at the front lines, because
yes, they are. They are now. They are now
doing leverage.
And I'll say something. Umar, you're absolutely right. We have to start dealing with ourselves, but that's going to take a centralized, organized force. It's going to take ideology. What do we believe in? It's going to take leadership, and it's going to take organization.
That's where the power comes in. That's the job.
You can't organize. You cannot build a nation without those three things. You can have ideology and no leadership. You can have leadership and no organization. Stokely Carmichael said the only way we're going to win, Kwame Ture, his name was later, organize, organize, organize. We need to develop a force that is an enforcer. Who's going to say, for example, if people betray us, how do we deal with those people? How do we deal with the fact that 15 people are killed in what do we do? How are we going to handle our own children? Right now, we have a group called MS-13 that's insane. They're insane. They chop people up. They tell mothers, they go into the homes of people on Long Island and say, we want your daughter or we want your son. They do it in El Salvador. We can't fight. Puerto Ricans are not planning to fight because they don't identify with them. But it could be them. How do we begin to deal with our own violence, the violence that we have inculcated in ourselves based on colonialism and racism? How do we begin to go up to young boys and say, I don't think you're going to pull this off tonight? How do we go to Chicago and tell the gangs, as Fred Hampton said, that there's going to be no gang fighting tonight? How do we do that? And by the way, doing that means we have to put our lives on the line.
Okay, but Felipe, you all do an album. It sells 1 million copies. You know how many people you reached? You reached about 5 million. You reached 1 million copies in the hands. That means about 5 or 6 million listen to it. So you organize through the poetry.
Through
You
art.
organize
Amen.
through words. You organize. You organize. It's about organization. You know.
That's why I love you, Woody.
And setting the values, making it clear we can't continue to value money more than we value each other.
And we can sit up here
Amen.
and talk about, and we can sit up here and talk about the work that we've done in the past. Actually, our real work is just beginning.
Yes, yes, yes.
That's right.
It's
Well,
just-
maybe in our 60s and 70s, the Last Poets can put together an album that says exactly what Woody, that becomes the organizing tool. It becomes the gun, as Amiri Baraka used to say. If your words are not bullets, then forget about it. Maybe we need to put that together. Now, Woody, we need about $50,000. Do you have it?
The word's out, baby.
Listen, Felipe. You know, if we say, oh man, we're gonna have 5 of the Last Poets, I can get it done.
Okay.
I don't need $50 million. I don't need $5 million. I didn't have anything when I did you guys down at the Pocketbook Theater. I didn't have Herb Dansky didn't have any money.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
We're in
Okay.
the museum, and we're in the Museum of Modern Art, man.
Is there a deal going on right now?
Wait, Woody and I are working something out. You know, Woody's from Detroit. Woody always thinks business. He's always been like that.
So unfortunately, we are under the tyranny of the clock, as the late great Gil Noble used to say. And we have about 5 minutes left. But I really want to thank all of our guests who very generously gave us this time for this very important conversation. And I wanted to go into the history, but thinking about it in terms of how the great Dr. John Henrik Clarke commanded us to, in terms of using history as a clock to basically orient where we are and give us some sort of stability to think about where we're going to go from here. And I think all of you did a fantastic job of that. So I want to thank again Abiodun Oyewole, Umar bin Hassan, Woodie King Jr., Felipe Luciano. I just wish we had much more time, but maybe that just means we have to do this again. I would like to make it happen again, and particularly.
Well, after we do the first album, after we do this next album, we'll be ready.
Sounds good.
Because you have to promote it.
Yes, yes. While the dew is still wet on the grass. Absolutely.
That's right. We're ready for that. That's a very good idea. Putting out an album that speaks to the youth, that speaks to our spiritual, political, and cultural needs. I'm ready for that.
Oh, hey, it's time. And the thing about it is that we know how to get it done. It's just a matter of having the resources to do it.
That's right. You know, we can entertain and educate. That's what we do. All right, y'all. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, take care, Felipe.
All right,
Take care, Papa. Later.
Felipe. See y'all soon, hopefully, man.
Take care, Umar. Love you.
You too, baby.
Love
and
you too,
thank all of you for joining us, and stay safe and have a good night.
Thank you.
Okay.
Peace.
And I just want
Kevin didn't say too much.
That's all right. That means it went really well.
Go ahead, Ron.
But I just want to thank everyone, all the Last Poets, Hank Williams, Robert Farrell, for making this event happen. It was, one of those events that you have to be at to have all many of the original Last Poets, as well as a scholar who is writing about, in sort of an exhaustive way, about the Last Poets and trying to document their importance, not just with poetry, but also with struggle. So I appreciate all the Last Poets, Woodie King, who also joined us tonight,